Prince Harry has recently delivered a raw and shaking confession that shattered the long-standing silence surrounding his relationship with the monarchy. Sitting in a dimly lit room far from the palace, he held a private letter from Prince William that reveals a betrayal far deeper than the public ever imagined. This was not a rehearsed PR statement, but a moment where the mask officially dropped, exposing the cold reality of a system more concerned with protecting its image than the truth. As Harry read the letter, his voice wavered with deep emotion, reminiscent of the vulnerability shown by Princess Diana. He explained that this correspondence, written in William's own hand, was never meant for public eyes and served not as a reconciliation, but as a calculated demand for silence. This revelation highlights the Cold War happening behind the iron gates, where the institution prioritizes privacy as a shield to manage perceptions and control the narrative. Harry compared the monarchy to an ancient house with cracking walls, suggesting that you cannot fix the structure by simply hanging more beautiful paintings. He argued that the royal machine is reaching its breaking point because it chooses to hide the truth rather than address its internal fractures. By exposing this letter, Harry has essentially rewritten the monarchy's script, proving that behind the polished facade lies a man cracking under the weight of duty and a family at war with itself. The silence that followed the arrival of the secret letter was perhaps the loudest sound Harry had ever heard. It wasn't a standard package delivered by a courier, but a document sent through back channels, cold evidence that the brotherhood he once cherished had been replaced by a rigid, corporate hierarchy. As Harry sat alone, staring at the royal crest on the envelope, he realized the door hadn't just closed. It was bolted shut from the inside. The words on the page weren't from a sibling asking about his children, but from an heir to the throne, issuing a warning that sounded more like a legal ultimatum than a family message. This was the true beginning of the Cold War within the House of Windsor, where blood became secondary to the crown. Inside the guarded corridors of the palace, the atmosphere turned icy. Staff members were reportedly told to pretend the correspondence didn't exist, even as tension vibrated through the ancient stone walls. William, usually the composed face of the monarchy, had finally revealed the side Harry long feared, the side prioritizing the crown's survival over family blood. The letter was a declaration of institutional authority, proving that the bond which survived their mother's tragic loss could not survive the pressures of a modern, crumbling Vuong Quoc. The palace was no longer a home. It had become a command center for a war Harry never wanted to fight. Harry describes reading those lines as a fracture in the soul. It was the crushing realization that the man he walked behind during their mother's funeral was now the man leading the charge to silence him forever. Every sentence was calculated, devoid of the warmth of two boys who once promised to protect each other at all costs. Instead, it was filled with directives and prohibitions, turning their family history into a cold contract managed by lawyers and PR experts. The warmth of the past was being systematically erased by the calculated coldness of a future king who saw his brother as a liability. Behind the iron gates, the palace machine moved rapidly to contain the fallout. They knew the power of this letter and were terrified of Harry's potential reaction. While the world saw distant brothers, the reality was a suffocating game of chess, where one brother played for legacy and the other fought for his very humanity. The secrecy was so intense that even King Charles was reportedly kept at a distance as William took full control of the situation. This was a quiet rebellion against the very idea of family, a strategic move that transformed a brotherly rift into a constitutional crisis that threatened to upend the entire royal structure. As Harry's hands continued to shake during this confession, the true weight of the monarchy's control became visible to all. It wasn't just about words on paper. It was about the intention to erase Harry's voice and his place in history. The secret letter stands as a monument to the betrayal that occurred in the shadows, proving that to preserve the firm, even the closest bonds are collateral damage. The world is finally understanding the price Harry paid for his freedom, and the cold, calculated cost William was willing to pay to maintain his path to the crown. This was the death of a brotherhood, documented in ink and sealed with the weight of a kingdom. The physical act of opening the letter was, for Harry, a journey back into a past he had tried so hard to outrun. As he broke the wax seal, the familiar slant of William's handwriting, the same hand that had written notes of encouragement during their school days, now felt like a weaponized ghost. This wasn't a digital email that could be deleted, or a text message that lacked weight. This was ink on heavy parchment, a medium the monarchy uses for its most permanent decrees. Harry noted that the letter lacked a traditional fraternal opening. There was no "Dear Harry" or "Brother," only a cold, immediate dive into the directives of the institution, signaling that the personal relationship had been entirely swallowed by the Crown's demands. Every word on that page felt like a calculated sting, designed to remind Harry of his place outside the inner circle. The ink seemed to carry a poison of formality, stripping away years of shared trauma and laughter in favor of rigid, clinical warnings. Harry realized in that moment that the William he knew, the boy who shared his grief in the wake of their mother's death, had been replaced by a man who spoke only in the language of duty and preservation. The letter didn't seek to heal the rift. It sought to cement the distance, using the weight of royal history to crush any hope of a private reconciliation. The content of the first paragraph was particularly jarring, as it reportedly addressed Harry not as a sibling, but as a former member of a functional unit. This semantic shift was the ultimate psychological blow, a deliberate attempt to depersonalize their bond. Harry felt the coldness of the palace walls emanating from the paper itself, a reminder that in the eyes of the monarchy, individuals are merely temporary tenants of titles. The letter made it clear that any further unauthorized communication from Harry would be viewed as an act of hostility against the state, turning a family disagreement into a matter of national security. As he moved deeper into the text, Harry discovered that the letter contained specific reminders of the financial and legal consequences of his continued transparency. It was a ledger of threats, disguised as advice, a cold accounting of what Harry stood to lose if he didn't return to the silence that the palace demands of its exiles. The realization that his own brother was the architect of this ultimatum was a fracture that Harry admits he may never be able to repair. It was the moment he understood that the bridge wasn't just burned, it had been dismantled, brick by brick, by the very person he once believed was his final ally. The secrecy surrounding the dispatch of this letter within the palace itself speaks to the depth of the internal crisis. Sources suggest that William bypassed the usual diplomatic channels to ensure this confession reached Harry without the softening influence of their father, King Charles. This was a direct, unvarnished strike from the heir to the spare, intended to end the conversation once and for all. By exposing this ink-stained betrayal tonight, Harry isn't just sharing a secret, he is showing the world the exact moment the brotherhood died, not through a public scandal, but through a private, cold, and calculated piece of paper. When news of Harry's confession hit the internal palace monitors, the reaction was not one of mere outrage, but of absolute, paralyzing panic. This was the moment the gray suits, the high-level courtiers who run the monarchy behind the scenes, realized that their elaborate system of containment had failed. The silent coup within the palace walls had already been underway, with Prince William increasingly taking the reins of power from a king who seemed caught between fatherly love and royal duty. This letter was the evidence of that shift, a document that proved William was no longer acting as just a brother, but as a sovereign in waiting, ready to cut ties with the spare to ensure the survival of the crown. Inside the private apartments, a generational clash was erupting with a force that threatened to destabilize the throne itself. Reports suggest that King Charles was blindsided by the severity of William's directives to Harry. While the king sought a path of quiet diplomacy and eventual reconciliation, William had moved to a strategy of total isolation. This wasn't just a family disagreement, it was a fundamental shift in how the monarchy handles dissent. The palace machine was now being recalibrated by William's hand, moving away from the soft power of the past toward a hardline stance that viewed Harry as a permanent threat to be neutralized rather than a son to be brought home. The courtiers quickly moved to erect a wall of silence, but this time the bricks were made of fear. Every attempt to dig deeper into the origins of the secret letter was met with a chilling lack of transparency. Senior staff were reportedly forced to sign new, even more restrictive non-disclosure agreements as the palace entered a state of emergency. What was unfolding was a quiet rebellion against the very idea of family transparency. William stood firm, refusing to let even the most trusted advisors soften his message to Harry. Every internal memo and leaked fragment pointed to a single truth. The heir had decided that the brotherhood was a price he was willing to pay for institutional stability. The psychological cost of this silent coup began to manifest in the very body of the institution. You could see it in the tense posture of the aides and the hollowed expressions of those caught in the crossfire. This institutional battle was less about a letter and more about who truly controls the narrative of the British monarchy. As William asserted his dominance, the soft, empathetic approach, once championed by Princess Diana, was being systematically replaced by the cold, calculated logic of survival. The royal mask hadn't just slipped. It had been shattered by the weight of William's resolve to protect the crown at any cost, even if it meant destroying the brother who once shared his every secret. While the palace attempted to maintain an image of business as usual, the fracture was visible to anyone paying attention. The silence from the palace was no longer comforting. It was deafening. It stirred a storm of speculation that no PR blueprint could contain. The monarchy, already frayed at the edges, was now at war with its own legacy. This pregnancy of secrecy, this hidden conflict, had matured into a full-blown crisis of trust. As Harry prepared to reveal the final, most damaging lines of the letter, the palace realized that they were no longer just at odds with a rogue prince. They were at odds with the modern world's demand for honesty. Harry took a deep, shaky breath, his fingers trembling as they traced the ink on the second page of the letter, and that was the exact moment the most brutal truth came to light. This wasn't just about titles or dry royal protocols anymore. This was the moment the mask of the ideal elder brother completely shattered into 1,000 pieces. William had admitted to something Harry had long feared, but never dared to fully believe. The Prince of Wales had personally and directly coordinated the leaking of Harry's private life to the British press. William confessed to using his own brother as a sacrificial lamb, a strategic distraction to shield his own image and that of Princess Kate from the relentless waves of public scrutiny. This was the ultimate betrayal, a knife driven directly into the soul of the brotherhood Harry had cherished since childhood. In those cold, calculated lines, William expressed no remorse or regret. Instead, he used a heavy, clinical language of governance and institutional politics, calling this betrayal a necessary media strategy to maintain the stability of the monarchy. William wrote that in the world of sovereign power, personal feelings are a luxury that can endanger the very survival of the institution. Harry realized with a sickening clarity that to William he was no longer a brother of the same blood, but merely a project to be managed or a risk to be mitigated. This transition from fraternal love to cold political calculation was terrifying, showing a man who had been entirely consumed by the ruthless demands of the palace machine. The letter went on to reveal an even darker secret that the palace had buried deep within its guarded corridors. William himself was the architect of the barriers that prevented Harry from seeing Queen Elizabeth in her final hours. William admitted to orchestrating the administrative and security hurdles to ensure Harry was completely isolated. Unable to say a final, private goodbye to his beloved grandmother, he justified this by claiming Harry's presence would have caused an unnecessary distraction for the crown during the sensitive and high-stakes transition of power. To Harry, this was a betrayal beyond any moral boundary. It wasn't just a power struggle. It was the cold theft of a basic human right, the right to be with family during their final moments of life. Harry confessed that as he read these words, the room seemed to spin, and his breath caught in his throat with a sharp, physical pain. Every memory of the two brothers growing up together, of leaning on each other in the devastating wake of their mother's death, suddenly became meaningless under the weight of this treachery. William, the man Harry once looked to as his shield against the world, was revealed to be the very person holding the sword against his back in the shadows. This betrayal didn't just destroy a personal relationship. It shattered Harry's faith in the entire royal system. proving that sincerity and love have no place in a palace where even your closest kin is willing to erase you to protect their own standing. The moment Harry shared these lines was the moment truth was restored to its rightful place, tearing through every layer of palace concealment and PR spin. The world no longer saw two glamorous princes standing side by side, but a devastating war between human compassion and absolute power. William had chosen the crown and accepted the cost of his own blood. Harry, holding the ink-stained evidence of this betrayal, has officially ended the illusion of a future reconciliation. The ultimate betrayal has been exposed, and from this point forward, the royal bloodline will forever bear the scar of a treachery that cannot be forgiven. It is the end of an era of silence and the beginning of the deepest crisis of trust in the modern history of the House of Windsor. The moment King Charles was briefed on the contents of the secret letter, a heavy, suffocating silence reportedly descended upon the royal residence. This was the moment a father realized he was no longer just losing a son in California, but was also losing the soul of the son who stood right beside him. The king, a man who has spent 70 years preparing for the crown, suddenly found himself powerless in the face of a generational war he could no longer mediate. Sources close to the inner circle describe Charles as being blindsided, not just by Harry's decision to speak, but by the cold, ruthless pragmatism William had displayed in the letter. It was a shattering realization that the Fab Four era wasn't just over. It had been incinerated by the very person Charles had trusted to lead the monarchy into the future. This wasn't merely a family disagreement. It was a fundamental fracture in the generational handoff of the British monarchy. Charles, who has often leaned toward a more empathetic, albeit traditional, approach, found his authority being quietly eclipsed by William's Iron Duke mentality. The letter proved that William was already operating as a sovereign, making life-altering decisions for the family without the king's full consent. For Charles, the heartbreak was twofold. He was watching Harry dismantle the institution from the outside, while watching William harden it into a cold, clinical fortress from the within. The king reportedly felt like a ghost in his own palace, a monarch who reigned over a kingdom that was being torn apart by his own heirs' conflicting visions of survival. The generational gap has never been more visible than in the aftermath of this confession. Charles represents a bridge to the past, a monarch who believes in the slow, steady endurance of the crown through quiet duty. William, however, has embraced a modern, almost corporate ruthlessness, viewing any threat, even his own brother, as a liability to be liquidated. Harry's exposure of the letter forced the public to see this cold reality. It revealed that the king is caught in a pincer move between a son who wants to burn the script and a son who wants to rewrite it in ice. The silent coup we discussed earlier was now fully manifest in the king's inability to bring his sons to the table, proving that the crown's weight has finally crushed the family's ability to function as a unit. Behind the scenes, the tension between Charles and William has reached a boiling point. While the palace tries to project a united front, the truth is a house divided. Charles reportedly sees William's actions as a betrayal of the family-first ethos he hoped to preserve, while William views his father's desire for reconciliation as a dangerous weakness. This is the true crisis of the modern monarchy, a king who is losing control and an heir who is taking it by force. The secret letter was the catalyst that brought this generational fracture into the light, showing a monarchy that is not just fighting for relevance, but is fighting itself for the right to define its own future. As the world processes Harry's shaking confession, the image of King Charles as a unifying figure has been severely compromised. He is no longer seen as the patriarch of a stable family, but as a man presiding over a wreckage. The letter has exposed the fact that the firm is no longer a family business. It is a battleground. This generational fracture is a wound that no amount of royal ceremony or public appearances can mend. It is a permanent shift in the royal tectonic plates, and as Harry prepares to reveal the final consequences of William's directives, the king must face the devastating truth that his legacy may be defined not by his reign, but by the irreversible war between his two sons. The most chilling revelation in Harry's confession wasn't just about William's ruthlessness. It was about how Princess Kate was systematically used as a human shield to protect the monarchy's failing facade. In the secret letter, Harry explains that William didn't just leak stories to save himself. He used Kate's immense public popularity as a weapon of distraction. Whenever a scandal involving the brothers or the institution's inner workings threatened to break the surface, a perfect story about Kate was deployed to capture the headlines. Harry describes this as the Shadow Queen strategy, grooming Kate for her future role while simultaneously stripping away her individual agency to serve the corporate needs of the crown. Reading through the letter, Harry realized that the woman he once called the sister he never had was being consumed by the same machine that drove him away. William's directives suggested a chilling level of control over Kate's public image, ensuring that she remained the unshakable anchor of the monarchy while the family's private life was in total disarray. Harry's confession highlights a heartbreaking irony. While the world admires Kate for her poise and silence, that silence is often a mandatory requirement of William's rigid Iron Duke doctrine. The secret letter proves that Kate wasn't just a partner in the royal journey. She was a strategic asset whose personal comfort was secondary to the institutional script. Harry's voice dropped to a whisper as he addressed the psychological toll this has taken on the Princess of Wales. He revealed that behind the smiling photos and flawless public appearances, there is a woman trapped in a perpetual state of performance. The letter implies that Kate was forced to distance herself from Harry and Meghan, not out of personal choice, but as part of William's campaign of total isolation. This revelation shatters the image of the Fab Four's rift being a simple personality clash. Instead, it shows Kate as a prisoner of a high-stakes PR war, a shadow queen who must sacrifice her own voice to maintain the illusion of a perfect, united royal house. The impact of this disclosure on Kate's reputation is profound and irreversible. For years, she has been the symbol of royal stability, the one person the public felt they could trust. But Harry's exposure of the letter suggests that this stability is a carefully constructed lie. It paints a picture of a marriage that is not just a partnership, but a political alliance where image is everything. By revealing William's directives regarding Kate, Harry has pulled back the curtain on the Shadow Queen myth, showing the world that the most beloved member of the royal family is also the one most vulnerable to the machine's Tan Hun logic. As Harry concluded this portion of his confession, the world was left to wonder about the true cost of Kate's crown. The secret letter stands as a testament to the sacrifice of the individual at the altar of the institution. Kate's role as the Shadow Queen has been exposed not as a position of power, but as a position of intense, suffocating pressure. The perfection we see on our screens is revealed to be a fragile mask, one that is increasingly difficult to wear as the truth of William's Cold War comes to light. The monarchy's future doesn't just depend on its heirs. It depends on the survival of the woman caught in the crossfire of their warring legacies. For years, the image of the Fab Four, William, Kate, Harry, and Meghan, was sold to the world as the vibrant, modern future of the British monarchy. We saw them walking side by side, smiling at global events, and promising a new era of unity that would bridge the gap between tradition and the 21st century. But the secret letter Harry holds tonight tells a devastatingly different story. It reveals that the Fab Four was never intended to be a genuine family union. It was a carefully constructed PR trap, designed to maintain public favor while the internal structure remained as rigid as ever. According to the letter, William viewed the sudden, explosive global popularity of Harry and Meghan not as an asset to the institution, but as a direct threat to the established hierarchy. The brotherhood that was supposed to be the foundation of this unity was, in reality, a competitive battlefield managed by rival press offices and cold, calculated directives. Harry's confession exposes the Fab Four collapse as an intentional dismantling orchestrated from within the very heart of the palace. The secret letter details how William instructed senior aides to ensure that the Sussexes' schedules, charitable initiatives, and media appearances never overshadowed those of the Waleses. It wasn't just about brothers choosing different paths. It was about a forced, systemic inferiority. Harry explains that the moment Meghan entered the picture and began to draw massive, unprecedented public interest, the Iron Duke doctrine was activated. The Brotherhood's shared dream of working together to modernize the monarchy was replaced by a rigid system of checks and balances designed to keep the Spare and his wife firmly in the shadow of the heir. The letter highlights a specific, tragic turning point: the 2018 royal tour of Australia and the South Pacific. Harry reveals that the staggering success of that tour and the public's overwhelming affection for Meghan triggered a wave of jealousy and defensive PR moves from William's household. The Fab Four image was aggressively maintained for the cameras, but behind the scenes, the letter proves that William was already drafting the blueprints for Harry's total isolation. The fraternal bond was sacrificed for the sake of the brand, proving that in the royal system there is only room for one sun to shine. The Fab Four wasn't destroyed by simple personality clashes or tabloid rumors. It was systematically deconstructed by a future king who feared that a charismatic, popular brother was a danger to the throne's long-term stability. Harry's hands continued to shake as he read the lines describing the final, tense meetings where the Fab Four myth was officially buried. The letter shows that William's focus during those confrontations was entirely on brand protection and institutional control rather than family healing or empathy. He spoke of the Sussexes in the letter as a separate entity that needed to be contained and managed, effectively excommunicating them from the heart of the royal operation long before they ever stepped foot on a plane to America. This was the ultimate, crushing realization for Harry. The brotherhood he had fought so hard to preserve was a fiction, a marketing campaign that his brother was willing to kill the moment it became inconvenient for the crown's rigid hierarchy. The world is finally seeing the Fab Four collapse for what it truly was: a tragedy of institutional jealousy and the cold rejection of modern influence. Harry's confession proves that the smiles we saw in 2018 were merely masks, hiding a Cold War that had already been lost in the private corridors of Kensington Palace. The secret letter serves as a grim autopsy of a dream, showing that the modern monarchy is structurally incapable of supporting two powerful, charismatic couples at once. By exposing these directives tonight, Harry isn't just venting his frustration. He is showing the world the fatal flaw of a system that destroys its most vibrant members to protect its most ancient, unyielding traditions. The Fab Four is dead, not because of a family feud, but because the crown required its death to ensure William's absolute, unchallenged control. The final page of this secret letter was no longer a space for revelations or explanations. It was a cold-blooded death sentence for the Brotherhood, delivered in the form of a chilling ultimatum. Prince William, speaking with the absolute authority of the future king, presented Harry with a devastating choice: total, unquestioning submission in exchange for a life of luxury and silence within the royal fold, or permanent exile with the total stripping of titles, finances, and most crucially complete erasure from the family's historical record. William didn't frame this as a threat. He called it a necessary administrative arrangement. In the world of the palace machine, freedom is never free. It is an expensive commodity that Harry realized he was being asked to pay for with his own blood and honor. This ultimatum was drafted with the clinical precision of a legal contract rather than the warmth of family correspondence. William made it explicitly clear that any attempt by Harry or Meghan to personalize their image or speak outside the authorized palace narrative would be viewed as an act of hostility against the state. Harry found himself backed into a corner where every path led to the loss of his true self. If he chose to stay and remain silent, he would become a programmed puppet, maintained only to serve the polished image of the crown. If he chose to leave, he would face the full, crushing weight of the royal media and legal teams, prepared to dismantle his reputation from the shadows. In that moment, Harry understood that William didn't just want to control his actions. He wanted to own his voice and his soul forever. Harry confessed that as he read those final, crushing lines, the ghost of Princess Diana loomed larger than ever. He saw with terrifying clarity that his mother had once stood before a similar ultimatum, a place where truth was a sin and compassion was viewed as a dangerous weakness. Tragically, William was now using the very same cruel, institutional techniques that had once broken their mother to suppress his own brother. Harry's choice for freedom wasn't an impulsive act of rebellion. It was a desperate fight for survival against a system that allows no room for individuality. The letter made it clear. In this monarchy, you are either a functional gear in the machine or you are an enemy of the firm. There is no middle ground for a brother who simply wants to be honest. The sheer weight of this ultimatum is exactly what drove Harry to reveal everything tonight. He realized that if he didn't speak now, his truth would be buried forever under layers of polished PR statements and historical revisionism. William had gambled that Harry would be too terrified of the loss of status and security to choose submission. But the Prince of Wales fundamentally underestimated the strength of a man who has nothing left to lose. By choosing freedom, Harry has embraced a path of extreme risk and isolation. But it is the only path that prevents him from becoming the next sacrificial lamb in his brother's quest for absolute control. This ultimatum was the final shot that ended any hope of a normal family life under the shadow of the crown. As Harry finally placed the letter down, the room felt hollow under the crushing weight of the truth. William's ultimatum had failed to break Harry. Instead, it had become the ultimate evidence of the ruthlessness of a system that is trembling in the face of honesty. This conflict is no longer about perks or titles. It is about the basic human right to exist as an independent person. As we move toward the final conclusion of this world-shaking confession, the world must face a haunting question. Can a monarchy built on threats and cold ultimatums truly represent the future of a nation, or is it a fortress crumbling from within because of the coldness of its heirs? The choice Harry made for freedom has set a fire that no palace spin can extinguish. As the final words of William's secret letter are read aloud, a heavy, irreversible silence settles over the history of the House of Windsor. The world has just witnessed the ultimate destruction of a legacy once defined by two brothers who promised to change the world together. Tonight, that promise lies in ruins, replaced by the cold, clinical reality of a final reckoning. William has chosen the crown, opting for the survival of the institution over the blood of his brother. And Harry has chosen the truth, opting for freedom over a life of sanctioned silence. This is not just a family breakup. It is a permanent fracture in the very foundation of the British monarchy, one that no royal wedding, jubilee, or PR campaign can ever truly mend. The image of the two boys walking behind their mother's casket, a symbol of unity that sustained the monarchy for decades, has been officially replaced by the image of two men standing on opposite sides of an unbridgeable ideological war. The palace's response to Harry's shaking confession has been a suffocating, tactical silence. But behind the scenes, the purge has already begun. The secret letter provided the roadmap for William's vision of a streamlined, cold-blooded monarchy, where the spare is no longer just a secondary member, but a non-entity. Reports from within the palace suggest a systematic effort to erase Harry's presence from official archives and family narratives, a digital and historical excommunication designed to protect the purity of William's future reign. William is building a throne of ice, a fortress where loyalty to the institution is the only currency accepted, and where the price of honesty is total, permanent isolation. This is the final message to the world. The crown does not forgive, and it does not forget. The impact of this 10-part revelation has created a massive, expanding hole in the public's trust. For the first time, the world is forced to ask a haunting question. Can a modern institution that treats its own family members with such ruthless, calculated cruelty ever truly represent the heart of a nation? William may have won the battle for institutional control, but he has lost the war for the soul of the monarchy. By sacrificing his brother to the machine, he has shown that the firm is no longer a family business. It is a cold, corporate entity that values image over humanity. The Shadow Queen strategy and the silent coup have been exposed, leaving the monarchy more vulnerable than ever to the charge of being an ancient, unfeeling relic. Harry, while finally possessing his freedom, now bears the heavy weight of the exile, a prince who has lost his home to gain his voice. The secret letter stands as the ultimate evidence of his betrayal. a document that proves the Brotherhood was a price William was willing to pay for his path to power. This is the ultimate tragedy of the Windsor family. In trying to protect the crown, they have destroyed the very bonds that made the people love them. The legacy of Diana's boys is dead, replaced by a cold, clinical hierarchy that views love as a liability and truth as an act of war. The royal bloodline will forever bear the scar of this ink-stained treachery, a reminder that under the gilded surface, the monarchy is a system that consumes its own. As we conclude this world-shaking confession, we are left with a monarchy that has been fundamentally reset. The mask has been shattered, and what lies beneath is a structure trembling in the face of transparency. Harry's exposure of the letter has changed the line of succession forever, not in terms of titles, but in terms of moral authority. The truth is out, and it has set a fire that no palace spin or media management can extinguish. Thank you for joining me on this 10-part journey into the heart of the royal crisis. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay informed as we continue to decode the power, the secrets, and the shifting legacies of those who rule from the shadows. The story of the secret letter is over, but the reckoning for the crown has only just begun.